Okay, welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. This is part two to my response to the discussion that Fatal J and Jody's Corner are having about Superman, my favorite comic book character of all time, along with the rest of the DC Trinity, Wonder Woman and Superman. So I'm going to play from where I was playing in the last video, because as I said, it's easier for me to respond, when I'm hearing them speak, like to what they're saying, rather than trying to remember or write notes. So I'm going to respond directly to what they're saying. So this is the next part.
All right. Because I'm just saying, if you want the Silver Age,
so he's
Superman,
just talked about like Injustice Superman and whether we like
Age.
whether
not,
we like.
Not
Superman is consistent throughout his whole entire canon mythos of being a certain type of character.
But not modern times Superman. The story.
Yes, even modern times. Even Rebirth Superman to this day is the freaking GoldenAge Superman. What you're talking
Silver
about
Age Superman. Golden Age Superman couldn't fly and didn't have the
So
sense.
you're talking about joints like what was that? Justice League War. You ever seen them joints? That comic book in the animated?
I seen
that was a Silver
So
Age
this is the
Superman.
last thing I responded to, where I was like,
do you like
this
War,
is New
Justice League
52
War?
Superman,
Yeah,
and I
you
don't
like
like Justice League
Then-
War. I don't like him
That was
dating
Superman,
Wonder
though.
Woman. It was all rubbish.
That motherfucker was doing some crazy stuff, and he
And
was messing Batman up in that.
And
he was giving him the business.
But that's
and it's not like I don't like Superman fighting or throwing down or him dating Wonder Woman necessarily. It's just it was very cheap the way they did it. It wasn't an interesting story. I don't know. I think that at that time they were trying to make Wonder Woman more interesting by dating Superman, not realizing that the reason people had lost interest in Wonder Woman is because she didn't have the media exposure and representation, which now we see. Everyone loves Wonder Woman now. As I said on my channel years and years ago before Wonder Woman came out, which you can go back and look.
not the Silver Age Superman. The Silver
Why
Age.
is it? See, this is what I don't understand. Why is it that people think that the Boy Scout Christopher Reeve Superman is a punk? That's weird to me. Superman will give you that work when needed. He's like Cap. Cap on the ship, turned up, beat the shit out of everything. It's the same thing. People think Superman is a buster. He ain't no buster.
I ain't never. But I'm just saying, the Silver Age Superman with the modern times is just not possible to me.
They're the same character, Fatal. Silver Age Superman is the same character.
I want to just stop here. What he just said now is the exact same thing they were saying about Wonder Woman. It is the exact same thing they were saying about Captain America before Captain America and Wonder Woman came out. In this cynical age, everyone likes to think aspirational heroes will never work in this age. They're not relatable. How can you relate to Wonder Woman? She's so perfect. She's so kind. She does anything wrong. How can you relate to Captain America? He's just this patriot. He's the whole point of the storytelling mechanism with aspirational heroes. It's like saying, how can you relate to Jesus, And I'm not a Christian or whatever, but or Buddha, the Buddha, because they're all aspirational heroes as well. Jesus, is probably the most well-known of aspirational heroes, characters, along the lines of Hercules, similarly were aspirational heroes. And then you have your kind of anti-heroes like Moses or something like that with a bit of a darker edge to them. But there's the incorruptible, never compromise, has a view of right and wrong, like Jesus did, right? He has absolute view of right and wrong, will never waver from that point of view that he has. And even if the laws of the Roman Empire were against what he believed, that we all be brothers and etc., and that there's this one God, even if the laws of the polis, the state, were against his views, he would still go against it. And that's exactly what Superman is, right? And I'm not saying Superman is a Jesus-like figure. I'm just saying that is what the aspirational hero is. You know, Captain America, Wonder Woman, Superman, and a number of other different characters. They're aspirational heroes. So everyone always says that they're not going to work. They're not going to work. Before Captain America came out, if you ever told people that a Captain America movie would work, they'll be like, "Oh, it's corny." So, you know, like, isn't he just like, you know, a kind of patriotic, nationalistic kind of American character? Like, that's never going to work. And then they'll think back to the film they made of Captain America, which was terrible, the first movie they made, and they'll be like, this character just doesn't work with modern times. And it's not true. It's in modern times, when the world is at the height of its cynicism, that those characters pop more, because they're like, you're like, whoa, you know, that's it. You know, if the world, you know, if I had the ability to do these things, you know, like, I would go to, you know, try and feed a homeless child, or I would, you know, stop, you know, a group of women who are being sex trafficked, or whatever it may be. The aspirational hero chooses that day to do that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing that makes them relatable. And furthermore, on top of that, let's forget all of the aspirational stuff and just look at Superman as a character. Clark Kent, Superman is boring. Let's put it this way. If Superman was just Superman with just the aspirational hero type, then Superman is a boring character. I will give it to you. That character as a hero is boring, because he can do a lot of things, he's got a lot of powers, it's very hard to kind of hurt him. So him on his own as a kind of action hero is boring. But Clark Kent isn't. Once you add that dynamic of Clark Kent, that's where you get the relatable character. Once you add the Kents and their good teaching and their humble teaching of this farm boy who's going to Metropolis, trying to, you know, make it in the big world, in the Big Apple. You know, if you can make it in Metropolis, just like New York, you can make it anywhere. And he's just that kid trying to, you know, get up and, you know, and fulfill that immigrant story and make something of the world. And he's a bit of a geek, you know. Girls don't like him. People look over him, you know. And I'm going to do a video on why I think Henry Cavill is a great casting for Superman, but a terrible casting for Clark Kent. Because I think that's the problem. He's too GQ, too good looking, too, you know, whatever. So as Superman, it works. So if you want to make an Injustice Superman, go to Henry Cavill. If you want to make a Red Son, you know, deconstruction of Superman, Henry Cavill's your guy. As soon as you need Clark Kent in the story, Henry Cavill doesn't not work, because you've got this muscly, you know, good looking, great looking kind of guy who's got to play like a geek. And that's why Christopher Reeves did work. I'm not saying I want another Christopher Reeves, but Christopher Reeves worked because there was something earnest and honest and simple and relatable about his Clark Kent. He was just a geeky guy, and you had to, he'd say these things, and they were funny and silly and, you know, and quirky, but you kind of still liked him. He just, you know, you'd want a beer with that guy, you know, even you'd want to just, you know, women would just want to give him a hug, like, oh, come on, you know. But in the world that he exists in, he's overlooked. He, you know, people don't treat him, you know, necessarily that great, because he's like a geek with glasses and whatever, and he has to keep that identity to protect the people that he loves, and that's what makes Superman relatable. So forget all the aspirational stuff, and he always has to do the right thing and all of that kind of stuff. Clark Kent is the relatable, more human character. He's probably the most human, fallible human character in all of comics. He is the archetype of that. You know, when you talk about, you know, Marvel always likes to say, oh, we've got all the relatable characters, Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Peter Parker's a rip-off of Clark Kent. He's a rip-off of Clark Kent with the glasses, working in the Daily Bugle. Oh, we made him a photographer instead. Now you have all these years and years of kind of mythos of Spider-Man. People overlook that, but at the time, I bet you when Spider-Man first came out, people were like, "Well, this is just Clark Kent, but younger, with the glasses and working in the Daily Bugle and with their own Perry Wright, which was J.J. Jameson. It was Clark Kent. It was the archetype of Clark Kent, and people say Spider-Man is one of the most relatable superheroes. Why? Because of Peter Parker. So why is Superman one of the most relatable heroes? Because of Clark Kent. And that's the problem with having a Superman movie where you don't have the proper mild-mannered Clark Kent as the center of the story. And that's why Man of Steel has its problems and it has its detractors, because that's the charm. The charm is, all of the charm comes almost exclusively from Clark Kent. Superman's just the guy who does the punching at the end and does the right thing, and you feel for him because Clark Kent is inside him and you don't want Clark to get hurt. So anyway, I'm going to move on to the next bit.
As 2020 Action Comics line, that's a consistent character for 70, 80 years. The character, you could take him into stories. You can have him go dark in certain times throughout the runs.
Exactly, Jody. That's right. That's right.
Zach did.
Zach took a non-canon graphic novel and made Superman based off of that. That is not Superman.
Yeah, he based him off of The Dark Knight Returns.
What's wrong with it?
Based him off of Superman Earth 1 and The Dark Knight Returns.
But look here, okay, Injustice.
And I like both of those comics. So Zack Snyder's Superman, and this is probably why he always says, "Oh, I know Superman, and I did base him off the comics." But Zack Snyder's Superman is based off of The Dark Knight Returns and probably Superman Earth 1. I think those are the main two books that he kind of looked at to form his Superman, to form Man of Steel. So it wasn't an original idea, an original take where it was like, oh, we're scared of Superman, because that had already been done, right? Like, oh, it's this alien invasion version of Superman. That had been done in the comics and done better than in Man of Steel. And Earth 1 Superman, I actually really, really love Earth 1 Superman. One of the reasons, because they have Clark Kent fully formed, and he's already the mild-mannered, geeky, things don't always go his way reporter from there, who's pining after Lois Lane, who's this kind of more strong-minded city chick with a lot of moxie, and who we all fall in love with. We can understand why Clark Kent's in love with Lois Lane. So we all root for him to get the girl. That is the relatable character, right? So in Earth 1, though, he is very stoic and silent, and he doesn't have much to say. But where Earth 1 got it right, and if maybe Zack Snyder had have been taken a bit more daring with Man of Steel, and I'm going to talk about Man of Steel more in comments, so just so that you guys know, and you just don't dislike my video, like downvote it, like I hate Justice League, absolutely hate it. Really like BVS, but I don't like what they did with Superman in it. So I'm a fan of Batman vs Superman, and I don't like Man of Steel. Okay, I liked it when I first saw it, but the more I watched it, the more I thought a lot of it was silly just on a film level. So take what you will. I know half of you are disliking me already, but I will have a more in-depth discussion of Man of Steel on another video. But in any case, just responding to what they were saying there, let me just remind myself what they were talking about.
Even you said you played that. Me and you can both say that it's not the Silver Age Superman. But people wanted it. Injustice sales was off the hook. People wanted the comic.
Because of the video game. Because of the video game.
But the people was buying the comic too.
Okay, they've gone past the point.
People want to see. Why you think Brightburn did so good? People want
Right.
to see
So I was saying that exactly that it was based off of the Superman Earth One, and that Superman was more stoic. Because one of my problems with Man of Steel is Superman doesn't have a lot of dialogue, or enough dialogue for us to get to know him and his motivations. We just have to assume his motivations because we know the classical Superman. But the problem is the movie, through his actions, without him speaking, contradicts the classical Superman. So we have no idea who this Superman is. We can't base it off what we know, our prior knowledge of Superman, and he doesn't speak enough for us to know his motivations. He's too stoic. And so when he screams at the end when he kills someone, you're like, well, I did, but then the next scene he's happy and he doesn't seem to have a problem with it. It's like, is he screaming because Superman doesn't kill? Because according to this film, I have no idea if this Superman doesn't care about killing, right? So that bit at the end of Man of Steel was completely lost on me. If it was set up that this Superman doesn't kill or does kill, then that would have had a more of an impact where I'd be like, oh wow, he took a real risk there, or something. But the book Superman Earth One, the reason I like it is because you get to hear what's going on in Superman's head through the the thought boxes that you have in comics, right? So this gets us to know the interior of Superman. That's the method by which we get to know the interior of what's going on in that Superman's mind. So it then becomes this kind of existential dilemma, being Superman and what it means to be Superman, that you can actually hear through the some of the poetic kind of discussions he's having in his own head. So it doesn't matter that he doesn't talk so much, but in Man of Steel you don't have that. So it's just this silent stoic character that doesn't work for Superman. So I'll continue.
the side of Superman where he freaking just using his powers to the limit.
Do they, Fatal? They do?
Yeah.
Where's the box office receipts that prove
Right, Jody.
Okay, I'm glad you said that.
That means they do not.
I'm glad you said that. Why did we get box office receipts for Brandon Ruth, or whatever his last name?
And I'll go to that again. We talked about that on your last episode.
Jody kills it here. Jody kills it here.
The superhero DC universe didn't really exist. It was coming off of the Schumacher Batman movies. DC was a joke back then. It had a reputation to build that the Dark Knight built.
I don't think so, because if you want to go there with the China,
I will take this even further. Okay, so Man of Steel made most of its money in its first week. It had a huge drop off in the second week. So it was the first weekend box office of Man of Steel that made up the majority of the 600 or 700 million that it made. It made about 200 and something million in the first week, had a huge drop off in the second week and third week. Okay, because what it did is it made a lot of new fans, much like the New 52 did, made a lot of new fans for this version of Superman, but alienated pretty much a lot of old Superman fans. And that is not what you want to do. You want to be able to bring on the new fans by having the big spectacle action scenes that people love about Man of Steel, while remaining true to what we know about the Clark Kent Superman character. And that would bring both the fans together. Rather than try and fix Superman, maybe add, because we'd never seen a Superman done properly within a CGI technology world that was new and was telling the story again and not relying on the kind of Christopher Reeve's legacy, which was what Superman Returns did, right? Which was another poor decision for them to make. Both were poor decisions. They were the polar opposite of each other. There's a middle ground where you get the old fans and the new fans to like it. So he's right. The Man of Steel made a lot of money coming off The Dark Knight, And the fact that it was the same creative team as The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises shows that it was really a failure, because that should have made close to $1 billion. Superman, the first movie, Man of Steel, with the hype train coming off The Dark Knight and applying that kind of film treatment where you take the mythology seriously. I'm not saying make Superman dark, which is what they did. Take the mythology seriously. Do a Batman Begins for Superman, and that would have made $1 billion if it was done right. And then what he's saying about Superman Returns is also correct, because actually that film overperformed. It did better than Batman Begins. Did better than Batman Begins in the box office, right? And it was coming off a DC world that was very shaky, wasn't setting up any universes, wasn't, post Dark Knight and Avengers, or within that world where everyone was hyped. I would call that time, that period of time when the Man of Steel came out, the golden age of superhero cinema. That is going to be looked back on the way that westerns were looked back on back in the day. Now there is a kind of saturation. You've got the point where the high points of the genre, even when a really good film comes out, people aren't, like, whoa, this is very exciting, because they've seen a lot of it before. That was the new point. So the fact that Man of Steel only made that amount of money was actually a failure. Same as BVS, should have made over $1 billion. And I'm sure if you talk to circles within within Warner Brothers, and the excitement that came off of the Man of Steel trailers, they will tell you that they expected that movie to make a lot more money, a lot more than it made, and it failed. So let's carry on.
Tim Burton joints, but the Batman was off the hook.
They were off the hook, but they weren't huge commercially successful films.
They were
how much Batman Returns made in the freaking box office.
But
I doubt
Batman Returns didn't make as much money as
Can we just be honest and say the Brandon Roof movie was whack as hell? It was whack.
Wait, are we talking about the box?
Brandon Roof was not whack. I will die for that movie. I ride for that Brandon Roof interpretation of Superman. Oh, please remember, do comment if you like this content. Comment, subscribe, discuss, send to if you want to send me into Jody's corner or whatever, or to Fatal J for him to listen to this, to my discussion of this. Please, I'm happy for you to do so. But otherwise, let me just say this. I ride for Superman Returns. And I don't mean that ironically. I think that movie is hugely flawed. I don't like Bryan Singer as a director. I think he messed up the X-Men movies. But that Superman movie, I did not like at first, and I didn't appreciate. And maybe it did, and I never watched it again until after Man of Steel, because the first time I watched it, I was bored out of my mind. But I gave it another chance, and I remember maybe even falling asleep during that Superman Returns movie. And I remember, again coming back to it after Man of Steel, and perhaps it's because of how much I disliked Man of Steel that it gave me comfort to see the classical kind of idea of Superman, even though I don't like the idea of them copying Christopher Reeves, and I wish they had have done a Man of Steel version, a Man of Steel Superman with a character that was closer to the a Batman Begins version of Superman with a character that was closer to the Brandon Routh character, but didn't look like Christopher Reeves. You cast somebody who doesn't look like Christopher Reeves, who isn't supposed to be an imitation, but just supposed to be a modern take on Superman. Like somebody maybe in their early 20s, like becoming an intern at the Daily Planet, something that most of us can relate to nowadays, where they're not, giving us like jobs at big companies anymore. They're making you interns. They're making you struggle a bit. That kind of thing, like a young 20-year-old trying to make it in Metropolis who happens to be Superman. I would have dug that, as long and with that kind of performance of the duality, where you have Superman as a distinct character and Clark Kent as a distinct character, and do a Batman Begins version of that. So I would have loved to see that, but that isn't what they did. So let's continue. I think Superman Returns is I think it's underrated. So essentially, I watched it again after Man of Steel, and again I may have been swayed, as I said, comforted a little bit by the fact that it was more of a classical Superman. But I think if people watch that movie again and forget about the fact that they want some big epic fight at the end of it, just watch the movie. And there are bits that give you chills. I think it gives you those Superman chills where he's saving the city, where he's the bad guys are beating him up and they throw him off the thing. Like there's sad, dark moments in that movie which I think actually kind of work. So anyway, that's my opinion on Superman Returns. I'll do a discussion of Superman Returns one day, actually, because I think it's an underrated movie.
Box office, or are you trying to get me to say Brandon Root Superman is whack? Because
No.
you went there to box office, and I'm addressing it.
No, I'm not saying Silver
worldwide
Age
like it was back then.
I'm not saying Silver Age is whack. I respect Superman.
No. Because
in my top three.
You said
The
Superman.
reason
What I'm saying is this:
Fatal
why
Jade.
is it so tough for Superman to change with the times a little bit?
Superman. I'll let Jody take this on for a minute before I respond to that. Why isn't it so a problem for Superman to change? Why isn't it a problem for Batman to change with the times? Batman does not change with the times. It's the same core values and character that we like. James Bond does not change with the times. Why does Superman have to change with the times? None of these classic characters that we enjoy cinematically change with the times. Why is it always Superman has to change with the times? And it's very simple. I'll tell you the reason why it is. It's the same problem Wonder Woman had. It's the same problem Captain America had. And I was writing it for Wonder Woman on my channel, saying, all you have to do is make a modern CGI version of Wonder Woman, and people will stop saying Wonder Woman is lame. And now they stopped saying Wonder Woman is lame because they were thinking back to the 70s show character with Linda Carter, who was fantastic for her time. But if you watch that with a modern lens, it's like, that's goofy. That's goofy, and people couldn't deal with it. I will tell you, I bet you any money, if in the future, let's say 30, 40 years away from now, they now have fully immersive experiences of Batman, right? Of films and TV shows, right? Where you get to be the Joker, or you get to be Batman. So they have this kind of simulation kind of style thing where you're actually, some new technology that is beyond CGI. So CGI, people look at CGI and they're like, oh, that's whack, man. That's not in any way realistic. I can actually be in this and, do all of these things. If you go to a world like that and they bring out the first few movies of Batman are whack, people will be like, oh, Batman's whack. Look at that old Batman, like, who's only 2D, They won't understand Batman until you give them their version of Batman in that fully immersive 3D environment world, right? So you need to have the classic Superman in this new technology, so that it's like the same from books to film. So characters from books, people will write from the characters from books or comics, And people will be like, oh, well, that character's boring. That's why they haven't done a film of him yet. Right? And it's like, no, the character's really interesting. You just need to see it. They need to see it in the language, the artistic language or medium that is most impresses upon people in a particular time. So once people see that classic Superman like that, they will roll for him, just like they roll for Wonder Woman, right? So and they roll for Captain America at the moment. So let me finish to hear what Jody says about this.
Why did he have to stay in
That's
a
the
Silver
idea
Age?
of him not changing that makes him great. Look,
That's the idea of any character.
Because Superman does not waver.
That
He does
once
not change,
they
no matter what it is. Whether it's war,
once we have the
disease,
iconic version of them, they don't
desperation, we
change.
aspire to look up to him for hope.
That's the idea of any character. Hercules, any character you have that becomes a classical kind of mythology, right? There's certain aspects of their personality and their being and their abilities and their skills that once we understand that, if you have Aladdin and he's not a thief, right? You do an Aladdin movie where he's not a thief, people are going to be like, wait, this is whack. Unless it's a really, really good take. Like somebody comes up with something magnificent, right? Where you can ignore the fact that, wait a second, this Aladdin isn't a thief. Like you want to do Aladdin in the modern world and the guy isn't a thief, then you've got problems. You've got, that is an Aladdin, right? So once a mythology is established, yeah, the core of it shouldn't change. Things can shift around that. But the core, the origin, the story, the thing, that's what people respond to universally. Not like where it's, certain people who are a bit darker and have a bit more of a kind of edgier personality, they like this version, but other people don't. You have to modernize the core mythology and make it work for our times. Anyway.
Because he doesn't waver. He doesn't change. He's
You're
not
right.
human.
You right, bro.
That's what makes him special.
You right.
You cannot humanize Superman.
Okay. This is a perfect place for me to stop because again I'm scared that the volume is going to go off. So I'm going to stop here and make this a part 2. Part 3 of the discussion coming right up. Remember, like, subscribe, please comment. Comment is the most important thing to me. I really enjoy reading comments and what you think of the discussion. If you think it's like working, any other way I can change the format, any ideas you might have. Okay.